The locker room was quiet except for the faint hum of the facility's ventilation system. Derren stretched his arms above his head, rolling his shoulders to shake off the tension from the trip to Alfheim. He tossed his jacket onto the bench, the soft thud echoing in the near-empty space. As the fabric settled, a small object fell from one of the jacket's creases, landing on the floor with a faint metallic clink. Derren frowned, crouching down to pick it up. The object was small, no larger than a quarter, and as he turned it over in his fingers, he noticed intricate runes carved into its surface. The material gleamed faintly under the locker room's fluorescent lights, its surface smooth but cool to the touch. It was elegant and sophisticated, too sophisticated for any ordinary trinket. "What the hell are you?" Derren muttered under his breath, turning the object over and over, his brow furrowing. He wasn't one for magical artifact or runic symbols, but even he could tell this wasn't something he should dismiss. As he stood, Clara entered the locker room, having just returned from storing her gear. She paused when she saw Derren's expression, one eyebrow raising. "What's with the face? Find another snack you forgot about?" Derren smirked, holding up the tiny device. "Not quite. This little thing fell out of my jacket. Look familiar?" Clara stepped closer, her sharp eyes narrowing as she examined it. "No. But those runes aren't random. That's craftsmanship. Did you pick it up in Alfheim?" Derren shook his head. "Not that I remember. Thing must have slipped into my jacket at some point. But where and how are the real questions." Clara reached out to take it, but the object pulsed faintly in his palm, a soft glow emanating from the runes. She pulled her hand back quickly, her eyes widening. "That's not normal." "No kidding," Derren muttered, carefully setting it on the bench. "It feels like, I don't know, like it's alive or something." Clara crossed her arms. "This isn't something we guess about. Let's take it to Eli. She'll know what to make of it." "Keebler's probably in her lab, up to her ears in wires and potions," Derren quipped, slipping the device into a small protective pouch. "Let's see what the elf genius has to say." They found Eli in her workshop, surrounded by a mix of glowing screens, enchanted tools, and an array of magical artifacts. She was hunched over a complex device, her silver hair falling in a curtain over her shoulder as she worked. At their approach, she glanced up, her violet eyes bright with curiosity. "Did you two already burn through your ammo stockpile?" she asked dryly, standing and wiping her hands on a cloth. Derren grinned. "Not yet, but I've got something more interesting for you." He handed her the pouch, and her eyebrows rose as she pulled out the runed device. Eli's expression shifted immediately, her casual demeanor giving way to sharp focus. "Where did you get this?" "Fell out of my jacket," Derren replied. "No clue how it got there." Eli turned the object over in her hands, her eyes narrowing as she studied the runes. "These symbols, they're a mix of elven and infernal. This is advanced work, and it's designed to be subtle, like a tracker or a marker." Clara frowned. "A marker? For what?" Eli set the object down on her workbench and pulled out a magnifying lens. "Could be anything. Surveillance, signaling, even binding. Whoever placed this on you didn't want you to know. It's cloaked in a way that makes it easy to miss until you're already compromised." Derren's smirk faded. "Compromised? You saying someone's been tracking me?" Eli didn't answer immediately, instead focusing on the device. After a moment, she looked up, her expression grim. "It's possible. This thing is dormant right now, but it's designed to activate under specific conditions. We need to figure out who planted it, and why." Clara straightened, her voice firm. "We need to tell Gunnar." Derren sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Great, just what I needed. A lecture about situational awareness." Eli shot him a look. "This isn't a joke, Derren. If this thing is what I think it is, it could have been tracking all of us during the Alfheim trip." That sobered him quickly. "Fine, let's go." The conference room was quiet except for the faint hum of the monitors lining the walls. Derren stood at the head of the table, holding the tiny runed tracker between his fingers, turning it over in the light. "This little bugger's been riding shotgun with me, and I didn't even know it," he said, his tone equal parts annoyance and curiosity. "The big question is, who slipped it on me?" Eli sat nearby, her silver hair catching the light as she stared at the tracker on the table. A series of holographic projections floated in the air above her, displaying magnified images of the runes. She tapped her fingers against the edge of her tablet, deep in thought. Gunnar leaned back in his chair, his single blue eye fixed on the device like it might spring to life at any moment. He crossed his arms, his cybernetic hand tapping idly against the table. "Let's start with the basics. Eli, what do we know about it?" Eli sighed, spinning her tablet around so everyone could see. "It's a sophisticated piece of work, combining elven and infernal magic. The runes suggest it's designed to track movement and potentially send signals to its owner. The thing is, it doesn't seem to work here." Clara, sitting across from Derren, raised an eyebrow. "Doesn't work? You're saying it's broken?" "No," Eli replied, shaking her head. "It's perfectly functional, but something about the protections on the workshop is blocking it. The wards we've got in place are messing with its signal." "Great," Derren muttered, leaning on the table. "So whoever planted it has no idea where we've been, at least while we've been here." Gunnar's gaze sharpened. "Let's go over this step by step. Derren, where have you been recently? Who've you interacted with?" Derren shrugged. "Aside from the team. Let's see. I've been to the Shadow Realm bar a few times, met with Rose and dealt with the local police after the raid. That's about it." "Rose," Clara said, her tone laced with suspicion. "She's crafty enough to pull something like this." Eli nodded. "It fits. The craftsmanship is too good for most of the people we've tangled with lately. Rose has the connections. And the motive." Derren smirked, leaning back in his chair. "Wouldn't be the first time she tried to play me, though I gotta say slipping this on me was bold, even for her." Karina leaned forward, her violet eyes narrowing. "Let's not rule out the Black Dawn just yet. They've been known to experiment with magic and tech." Shade, standing in the corner with his arms crossed, spoke up for the first time. "Possible, but unlikely. The Black Dawn operatives we've encountered haven't been this subtle. Their methods are more direct. And deadly," Clara added grimly. "What about Homeland?" Ashley asked, glancing at Gunnar. "Could the mole we've been dealing with have something to do with this?" Gunnar frowned. "Maybe, but whoever planted this needed proximity to Derren. That rules out most of Homeland's agents." Eli tapped her tablet, enlarging an image of the tracker. "There's something else to consider. These runes, they're not just for tracking, they're cloaked, designed to avoid detection for as long as possible. Whoever made this knew what they were doing." Derren's smirk turned into a grin. "Sounds like Rose, all right. She's got that mix of brains and guts. And let's not forget, she's always poking her nose where it doesn't belong." Karina tilted her head. "Why would she risk it, though? What's the endgame?" "To find us," Gunnar said flatly. "To find the workshop." The room fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them. Finally, Shade broke the tension. "If she's looking for the workshop, it's not just curiosity. She wants leverage." "So," Derren said, breaking the silence, "what's the play? Do we confront her? Turn the tables?" Gunnar glanced at Eli, who was already studying the tracker again. "First, we confirm it's hers. Eli, can you extract a magical signature or anything else that ties it to Rose?" "Already working on it," Eli replied. "But if it's her work, there's a good chance she's already expecting us to find it." "Which means she's ready for us," Clara said, her expression grim. "That's fine," Gunnar said, his voice cold and steady. "We've dealt with Rose's games before. This time we play smarter." The war room was alive with tension, the pack seated around the table, their expressions ranging from irritation to intense focus. Gunnar stood at the head of the room, his presence commanding, his single blue eye blazing with resolve. "If Rose wants to play games," Gunnar said, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade, "then let's play games." The room quieted, all eyes on him. Derren leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a small smirk playing on his lips. Finally, a game I can get behind. Gunnar ignored the quip, turning his gaze to Eli. Eli, I want to know if there's been any unusual activity around the facility in the last week. Anything that didn't sit right? Eli, seated at her usual spot with her tablet in hand, nodded. Her silver hair shimmered under the fluorescent lights as she pulled up the security logs. Her fingers danced across the screen, her violet eyes scanning the data. After a moment, Eli frowned. There was a report of a security breach 3 nights ago. The room stirred. Clara straightened in her chair and Karina leaned forward, her expression sharp. Gunnar's voice was calm but demanding. Details. Eli tapped on her tablet, bringing up a holographic projection of the report. 2 individuals, a young man and a woman, were spotted near the facility's perimeter. The wolves intercepted them before they got too close, but by the time the guards arrived, they were gone. Derren whistled low. And nobody thought to bring this up sooner. Eli shot him a glare. It was logged and filed. The guards didn't think it was a serious threat because the wolves chased them off. Describe them, Gunnar ordered. Eli enlarged the footage captured by one of the external cameras. The grainy video showed 2 figures, barely discernible in the moonlight. The man was lanky, moving with nervous energy, while the woman had a more deliberate stride, her head covered by a hood. Not much to go on, Ashley muttered, crossing her arms. Clara nodded. But if they got this close, it means they knew where to look. That's not a coincidence. Rose, Derren said, his voice laced with certainty. She's got her lackeys running recon. Probably sent them out to confirm the workshop's location. Karina's violet eyes darkened. She's not just curious, she's probing our defences. Exactly, Gunnar said. And now we have confirmation that she's stepping up her game. If we let this slide, it'll only escalate. Eli's fingers flew across her tablet as she analysed the footage further. The wolves kept them at bay, but they didn't engage. These 2 knew how to avoid a confrontation. They were testing us, Shade said from the corner, his voice quiet but full of conviction. Seeing how far they could go without getting caught. Gunnar nodded. Eli, I want a full diagnostic of the security system. Find out how they got that close and why the alarms didn't escalate. Clara, work with Jewel to increase patrols with the wolves. Make sure this doesn't happen again. Derren leaned forward, his smirk returning. So, what's the plan, boss? If Rose wants to play, how do we make her regret it? Gunnar's gaze hardened. We don't just play, we set the rules. If she's watching us, we make sure she sees what we want her to see. And when she makes her move, we'll be ready. Eli glanced up from her tablet. You're suggesting we bait her? Exactly, Gunnar said. But we do it on our terms. She wants to find us? Let's give her something to find. Karina raised an eyebrow. And what do we do when she takes the bait? Gunnar's voice was cold and deliberate. We remind her why messing with the pack is the worst mistake she'll ever make. The war room fell silent at Derren's remark, his voice cutting through the tension like a well-aimed shot. He leaned back in his chair, a glint of mischief and calculation in his dark eyes. You know, he said, tonight's a new moon. If I were going to recon someone, that's when I'd do it. Gunnar's piercing gaze locked on him, the weight of his words sinking in. You're right, Gunnar said, his tone firm but thoughtful. He turned to the others. If they're bold enough to come this close during the moonless night, we need to be ready. Eli pulled up a tactical map of the workshop's perimeter, the holographic image flickering above the table. We can't rely on just the wolves to catch them this time. If they're testing us, we need to show them what happens when they push too far. Clara nodded, her expression resolute. We need tighter patrols and more eyes on the perimeter, and we can't rule out the possibility of them using cloaking magic or other tricks. Ashley crossed her arms, her green eyes scanning the map. If they're coming, they'll want to avoid direct confrontation again. We set traps, funnel them into areas where we can control the fight. And we use the darkness to our advantage, Shade added from the corner. They think it's their ally, but it can be ours. Gunnar folded his arms, his cybernetic fingers tapping against his bicep. We split into teams. One group monitors the perimeter, the other holds a reserve position inside. If they get past the outer defences, we make sure they regret it. Gunnar began assigning roles. Clara, take Jewel and Omega. Strengthen the perimeter with the wolves. Keep everything tight. Ashley, you and Desera take Overwatch positions. I want you covering the eastern sector. Highest probability of entry based on the last breach. Desera grinned, already picturing herself on high ground with her rifle. Finally, some action. Eli, Gunnar continued, you're on the inside with me. Work on detecting any magical cloaking or other tricks they might use. Shade, you stick to the shadows and watch for anything they miss. If they get close, you'll be our last line of defense. Karina leaned forward, her tone sharp. What about me? You're with me and Eli, Gunnar said. I want you ready to neutralize any magical threats they bring. Eliana, Maelorion, if you're willing, I'd appreciate your oversight from inside. If this is as magical as we suspect, your insight will be crucial. Melorian nodded. We will ensure nothing escapes our notice. Derren smirked. And me? Let me guess. I'm on charm duty again. Gunnar shot him a look that almost passed for a grin. No, you're on the ground with Thunderstrike. If they think the dark's their ally, remind them how loud a 12-gauge can be. Music to my ears, Derren said, cracking his knuckles. Let's see how sneaky they can be when I light up the night. Gunnar stood, his presence commanding. Everyone knows their role. We move out at 2,000 hours. If they show up, we end this game before it begins. The war room was dimly lit, the only light coming from the holographic displays and a few tactical monitors scattered around the table. Gunnar, Eliana, Maelorion, and Eli gathered around, each focused on the feeds streaming in from the stealth drones and security cameras. The radio chatter crackled softly in the background, a mix of calm voices issuing routine updates. Outside, the new moon hung invisible in the sky, casting the world into an unnatural darkness. Eli's fingers danced across the controls of her console, pulling up a thermal imaging overlay of the perimeter. Clara and Jewel are moving along the northern edge with Omega, she said, her voice steady but alert. No signs of movement so far. On another screen, the feed from Desera's Overwatch position came into view. The sniper was perched high on a warehouse rooftop, her scope sweeping the tree line. Ashley's voice came over the comms. East sector clear, no activity. Keep your eyes open, Gunnar replied, his tone sharp but calm. If they're out there, they'll wait for the right moment to move. Maelorion stood slightly apart from the others, his keen gaze fixed on the magical readings emanating from the perimeter. The wards are holding, he said softly. But there is a disturbance. Faint, almost imperceptible. Eliana nodded, her expression tense. They're testing us, probing for weaknesses. Gunnar glanced at them. If they're relying on magic, we'll see it coming. Eli's gear will pick it up and Karina is ready to neutralize anything they throw at us. Melorian raised an eyebrow. Confidence is an admirable trait, Gunnar. But remember, cunning is often the weapon of choice for those who dwell in shadows. Then let them try, Gunnar said simply, his cybernetic hand resting on the hilt of Starbreaker. We've got enough surprises of our own. Derren's voice came through the comms, low and easy. Southern sector quiet as a church on Sunday. Either they're scared or they're waiting for the fireworks. You'd like that, wouldn't you? Ashley's voice was tinged with amusement. Damn right, Derren replied. I've got Thunderstrike primed and ready. If they want to play in the dark, I'll give them a light show they won't forget. Eli rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smirk. Keebler, she muttered, half to herself, her cheeks flushing faintly. The minutes ticked by, the tension in the room palpable, On one screen, Shade moved like a shadow himself, his figure barely visible as he melted into the darkness outside. On another, Karina stood just within the tree line, her sharp eyes scanning the forest with unwavering focus. "Anything?" Gunnar asked, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Nothing yet," Shade replied over the comms. "But they're out there. I can feel it." Aeliana exchanged a glance with Maelorian. He's right. There's a presence, faint, but growing. Gunnar leaned forward, his jaw tight. Then we wait. When they move, we'll be ready. The workshop was a fortress of vigilance, every member of Echo Division in position and ready. The new moon's darkness hung heavy, a veil hiding whatever threat loomed just beyond the perimeter. "Midnight's coming fast," Eli said, checking the time on her display. "And so is the detainee transport." Gunnar nodded, his gaze fixed on the monitors. "Let's hope this stays quiet long enough to get him out. But if it doesn't..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room already knew the stakes.
All right, you've made it this far. That means either you like what you're seeing, or you're lost. Either way, no harm in sticking around, right? Go on, hit that subscribe button, join the team. And while you're at it, hit like, because, let's be honest, you're already invested. And the bell? That's for you if you don't want to miss any of the action. You wouldn't want me to come find you. See you soon. And remember, once you're in, you're family.